Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Daily English Lab, where learning English is easy, natural, and fun. I'm Lily. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today for a very unique episode. Today, we aren't just looking at dry grammar rules or lists of single vocabulary words. Instead, we are going to explore a deeply human story, a story about an incident that happened right in my own apartment building. It is a story about a charming but over-friendly neighbor, a series of awkward social misunderstandings, and the ultimate silence that grew between us. More importantly, it is a practical lesson about a trap that many English learners, and honestly, many native speakers, fall into every single day: the invisible line between true politeness and chronic people-pleasing. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone asked you for a favor or invited you somewhere, and everything inside your mind was screaming no, but your mouth somehow opened and said, "Oh, I'll try"? It's an incredibly common feeling, isn't it? We do it because we want to be nice. We want to be perceived as helpful, neighborly, and kind. But as we will see in today's narrative, when we use vague, overly polite phrases to avoid a brief moment of discomfort, we often pave the way for a massive, complicated qui pro quo. A qui pro quo is a wonderful word borrowed into English that signifies a profound misunderstanding, a case of mistaken interpretations. So, let us begin our story. Get comfortable, grab a warm cup of coffee or tea, and listen closely to the rhythm, the intonation, and the specific social vocabulary woven throughout this tale. The incident and the intrusive Tuesday morning in early autumn. I was rushing out of my apartment, balancing a heavy laptop bag on one shoulder, holding a travel mug of hot coffee in one hand, and trying desperately to lock my front door with the other. I am sure you can picture the scene. I was the absolute definition of a person in a hurry. Just as I finally managed to turn the key in the lock, I heard a cheerful voice boom down the hallway. "Good morning, Lily. Beautiful day, isn't it?" I turned around to see Arthur. Arthur had moved into the apartment right across the hall from me about 3 months prior. From the very day he arrived, he proved himself to be an incredibly warm, energetic, and gregarious person. He was the type of neighbor who always wanted to have a chat. Now, under normal circumstances, having a friendly neighbor is a wonderful thing. It makes a building feel safe and community-oriented. But Arthur had a slight tendency to be what we call intrusive. When someone is intrusive, it means they enter into your personal space, your time, or your life without an invitation. They don't mean any harm by it. They just lack a bit of social awareness. Arthur was smiling broadly, wearing a bright apron, and holding a small cardboard box. "Lily," he said, stepping right into my path, completely ignoring my tense body language and the fact that I was actively looking at my wristwatch. "I am so glad I caught you. I have a tiny, completely insignificant favor to ask you. It's really nothing at all." Whenever someone starts a request by telling you it is insignificant or nothing at all, you should probably prepare yourself, because it is usually a sign that they are trying to minimize a request that is actually quite substantial. Arthur continued enthusiastically. "I have to fly out of town for an unexpected business trip. I'll be gone for exactly 3 weeks. I was wondering if you could look after my apartment while I'm away. It's very simple, really. It just involves coming in every single day to water my collection of rare tropical orchids. They require an exact amount of misted water at precisely 10 a.m., and checking my physical mailbox down in the lobby, sorting the junk mail from the important letters, and feeding my tropical fish twice a day. Oh, and keeping a spare set of my keys just in case an emergency contractor needs to come in to fix the kitchen pipes. What do you say?" My heart instantly sank into my shoes. 3 weeks? Every single day? Misting rare orchids at exactly 10 a.m.? At that specific time in my life, my work schedule at the office was absolutely overwhelming. I was managing a major administrative transition, staying late almost every evening, and dealing with intense professional pressure. The absolute last thing I had the time, energy, or mental capacity for was managing the daily ecosystem of another person's apartment. The request felt deeply intrusive, and the thought of committing to it filled me with an immediate wave of anxiety. The internal conflict and the trap of vague politeness. This was the critical moment. This was the exact intersection where I needed to establish a firm, healthy boundary. In sociology and psychology, boundaries are the invisible borders we set to protect our time, our energy, and our personal peace. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you are mean, it simply means you respect your own limits. But in that high-pressure moment, standing in the dimly lit hallway, looking at Arthur's hopeful, smiling face, I froze. I fell straight into the trap of people-pleasing. People-pleasing is the psychological habit of prioritizing other people's happiness and approval above your own well-being, often because you are terrified of being disliked or perceived as rude. Instead of looking Arthur in the eye and saying a clear, direct, and polite no, my brain began scrambling for an escape route that wouldn't cause any immediate awkwardness. I didn't want to see his smile fade. I didn't want him to think I wasn't a good, supportive neighbor. So instead of using clear English, I resorted to the worst kind of vague, non-committal politeness. "Oh," I stammered, offering a weak, strained smile. "Wow, 3 weeks? That's quite a long time. I am incredibly busy with a massive project at work right now. My schedule is completely upside down, so I'm really not sure if I can manage all of that." Now, let's pause the story right here for a brief language analysis. In my mind, by saying, "I'm really not sure if I can manage," I thought I was gently dropping a hint. I thought I was implying, "No, I cannot do this. Please ask someone else." But to an enthusiastic, optimistic native speaker like Arthur, the phrase "I'm not sure" does not mean no. It means there is a chance. It means the door is still open. Arthur didn't even hesitate. He waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about the busy schedule, Lily. You're a professional. You're organized. You can handle anything. It will only take 5 minutes of your day. I knew I could count on a great neighbor like you." Before I could correct him, before I could find the courage to speak up, he reached out, grabbed my limp hand, dropped his heavy metal ring of keys into my palm, and smiled warmly. "The instructions for the orchids are on the kitchen counter. I leave tonight. You are a lifesaver." And with that, he turned around, walked back into his apartment, and shut the door. I stood there, alone in the silent hallway, staring down at the keys in my hand. I felt physically ill. I hadn't actually said yes, but because I hadn't explicitly said no, the situation had bypassed my control. I walked down the stairs to the lobby in a complete daze, my mind spinning with anger. Not at Arthur, but at myself. Why hadn't I just spoken clearly? Why is saying no so incredibly difficult? The quid pro quo and the weight of silence. The next morning was Wednesday, the official first day of Arthur's trip. At 9:55 a.m., I was sitting at my desk at the office, completely buried under a mountain of urgent procurement files. My phone was ringing, emails were flashing on my screen, and a colleague was standing at my door waiting for a signature. Suddenly, I remembered the orchids. 10 a.m. A wave of intense resentment washed over me. I wasn't his employee. I hadn't agreed to this. I made a sudden, deliberate executive decision right then and there. I was not going over to his apartment today. I simply couldn't. I told myself, I will go tomorrow evening after work just to make sure the fish are alive, but I am not bending my entire life around these ridiculous plants. But because I felt guilty for failing to meet his expectations, even though those expectations were completely unfair, I did something even worse. I chose silence. On Thursday evening, I finally used his keys to enter his apartment. The air inside was still and warm. I quickly fed the tropical fish, gave a careless splash of water to the orchids, collected a massive pile of envelopes from his mailbox, and left. It took 15 minutes of my time, but the emotional cost was much higher. I felt violated, annoyed, and constantly anxious that I was doing it wrong. By the second week, my work stress reached an absolute peak. I missed another day of feeding the fish. Then I missed 2 days. The guilt intensified, and with the guilt came an avoidant behavior pattern. I stopped checking his apartment entirely. Then the true quid pro quo manifested. On Friday of the second week, I received a text message from Arthur. "Hi, Lily. Hope everything is going beautifully. Just wanted to check in. I had a package delivered to the lobby yesterday that contains highly sensitive documents. Could you please bring it up to my kitchen? Thanks again. You're an angel." I stared at the text message for an hour. I hadn't picked up his mail in 4 days. I didn't know if the package was there. If I replied to the text, I would have to admit that I hadn't been fulfilling the duties he assumed I had accepted. The thought of that confrontation filled me with dread. So what did I do? I chose silence again. I simply did not reply to the text message. I told myself I would handle it when I got home, but by the time I arrived at 9 p.m., exhausted and drained, I just crawled straight into bed. Over the next few days, Arthur sent 2 more messages. "Lily, is everything okay?" And then, "Hi, Lily. I see you're reading my messages but not replying. Is there a problem with the apartment?" The silence between us grew heavy, dense, and incredibly awkward. By avoiding a simple, direct conversation, my silence had inadvertently created a massive misunderstanding. Arthur now believed that something catastrophic had happened, either to his apartment, his beloved orchids, or that I was completely angry with him for some mysterious reason. The lack of clear boundaries had transformed a minor neighborly interaction into a stressful psychological drama. Every time I stepped out into the hallway of my own building, I looked left and right, terrified that I would encounter him or hear his voice. My home had ceased to feel like a sanctuary. The return and the art of firm politeness. 3 weeks finally passed, and the day of Arthur's return arrived. I knew he was coming back on a Sunday afternoon. I sat on my couch, listening closely to the sounds of the elevator down the hall. Finally, I heard the heavy thud of suitcases rolling across the floorboards outside. My heart began to race. I knew I couldn't hide behind silence forever. The time had come to face the situation, clear up the qui pro quo, and establish the boundaries that should have been set 21 days ago. I picked up his ring of keys, gathered the stack of mail I had neglected, took a deep breath, walked across the hall, and knocked firmly on his door. When Arthur opened the door, the contrast in his demeanor was stark. The bright, booming, overconfident man from 3 weeks ago was gone. Instead, he looked cautious, defensive, and deeply uncomfortable. The atmosphere was incredibly awkward. "Oh, hi, Lily," he said quietly, not smiling. "You're here. Is everything okay? You completely stopped replying to my messages. I honestly thought you were furious with me or that something terrible had happened." This was my moment. I had spent the entire weekend practicing exactly what to say. I had realized that trying to make up a series of elaborate lies or excuses would only prolong the problem. I needed to be direct, transparent, and completely accountable, while using firm, polite English structures to protect my space for the future. I looked him directly in the eyes, kept my voice calm, even, and warm, and said, "Arthur, please accept my apologies for the lack of communication over the past 2 weeks. That was my mistake, and I am truly sorry for causing you any worry or stress. The truth is, when you asked me to look after your apartment before you left, I was already completely overwhelmed with an intense project at my job. When I said I wasn't sure if I could manage, I was trying to express that I didn't have the capacity for it. However, I realize now that I wasn't clear enough, and I shouldn't have accepted your keys. Arthur blinked, caught completely off guard by my directness. His defensive posture softened slightly. "Oh, I had no idea you were under that much stress, Lily. You should have just told me." "You're entirely right, Arthur," I replied gently but firmly. "I should have been direct from the very start. Because I didn't set a clear boundary, I wasn't able to take care of your plants or mail the way you expected, and that wasn't fair to you either. I want to be a good neighborly presence in this building, but I simply cannot commit to house-sitting or pet-sitting duties. In the future, if you need assistance while you are away, I will have to decline, but I am more than happy to give you the contact information of a fantastic local professional service that handles home care perfectly." I handed him his keys and the stack of mail. Arthur looked down at the keys, then back up at me. For a second, there was a quiet pause. Then, a massive look of relief washed over his face. He actually let out a small laugh. "Wow, Lily, thank you for being honest with me. I apologize too. I realize now that I completely rushed you that morning and practically forced those keys into your hand. I can be a bit like a bulldozer when I'm stressed about a trip. I'm just so relieved you aren't angry with me." We stood there for a few more minutes, chatting naturally about his trip. The heavy, suffocating tension that had filled the hallway for weeks completely evaporated. Why? Because clarity is the ultimate form of kindness. By using firm, polite, and completely unambiguous language, I had repaired the relationship, reclaimed my personal peace, and ensured that he would never cross that boundary again. Politeness versus people-pleasing. My friends, let's take a moment to reflect on the core lesson of this story, because it applies beautifully to your journey in mastering English communication. There is a profound difference between being a truly polite person and being a chronic people-pleaser. Politeness is about respecting others. It involves using kind words, showing empathy, listening actively, and maintaining good manners. It sounds like, "I appreciate your offer, but unfortunately, I'm unable to commit to that right now." It is clean, respectful, and leaves no room for confusion. People-pleasing, on the other hand, is rooted in fear. It is a lack of boundaries disguised as politeness. When you use vague phrases like, "I'll try," "maybe next time," "I'm not sure," or "let me think about it," when you actually mean a definitive no, you aren't actually being polite. You are simply protecting yourself from a temporary moment of social discomfort, and in doing so, you create a breeding ground for misunderstandings. To help you unlock your speaking voice and avoid the exact trap I fell into with Arthur, let's look at some specific, highly effective phrases you can use to decline requests or invitations firmly and beautifully. 1. When someone asks for a heavy favor, "I'd love to help you out, but unfortunately, my schedule is completely full right now, so I'll have to pass." 2. When declining an invitation gracefully. "Thank you so much for thinking of me. I won't be able to make it this time, but I hope you have a wonderful time." 3. When someone pushes you after you've dropped a hint. "To be perfectly direct, I don't have the capacity to give this the attention it deserves, so I must decline." Remember, the goal of communication is always communication, not perfection. It is about expressing your true intent clearly, confidently, and with respect for yourself and others. Thank you all so much for joining me today on Daily English Lab. If you found this story helpful and learned some valuable vocabulary, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Now, I have a question for you to practice your English in the comments section below. Have you ever had a misunderstanding with a neighbor or friend because you didn't say no clearly? How did you handle it? Leave your stories below in English. I absolutely love reading your responses and interacting with you. Until next time, everyone, Keep practicing, keep setting your boundaries, and keep speaking your truth. Bye-bye for now.